Welcome to Pathways, a career podcast from the Idaho State University Career Center. I'm your host, Mark Beaver. Today, we're speaking with Amy Salmore, University Planner for Idaho State University. Amy has one of these jobs that I never knew existed. And even once I had an idea of what her job was, I never knew what all it entailed. This is a fascinating conversation about a job that isn't really one that most people think about, and also finding ways to incorporate many passions into one job. Please settle in and listen to my conversation with Amy. Hey Amy, how are you doing today?
I am doing well, and how are you, Mark?
I'm pretty good, thanks. Yeah. So you have one of these jobs on campus that the first time that I met you, I thought, what is this job? Like, what? I didn't know these kind of things existed at a university. So can you tell us a little bit about what your job is and kind of like a bird's eye view, and then maybe a little bit of like what the day-to-day is like as well?
Okay, excellent. So I am the university planner. And planners and facility services, we deal a lot with the physical space on campuses. That includes the internal building space as well as the outside landscape, open spaces, and how we experience and navigate space as human beings in the campus environment. So part of that is doing long-term planning. So I'll be soon initiating a long-term campus plan, which can be a 20-year, 50-year, 100-year plan.
Oh, wow.
As well as we manage a lot of the day-to-day guidelines and implements, design standards for new buildings and renovations, sign standards, many small things like that. I get a lot of things that are other duties as assigned, so a lot of small things in the cracks where they're not really sure who needs that job. Here come the planners. Planners love to dive in and do that. I also assist our design and construction and our trades crew on projects. So if we're renovating a space, I'll look through on that kind of the architectural coordination of mechanical, electrical planning, work with our carpenters and our electricians and our plumbers and our HVAC mechanical people. So I have a really interesting diversity of duties.
Yeah.
What I love is I work with everyone on campus. So I will work from people from our custodians and helping them with their operations in labs and helping them have where they need to work on campus because they're in every single building, every single space, to a lot of our research faculty, our student affairs groups from enrollment, admissions, registrars, to our student rec people. So I get to experience everybody and the students. So that's one unique thing. I work with everybody, and that's probably the most enjoyable part of my job.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that seems like pretty broad. There's a lot of different stuff going on. What would if you could boil down to what does 90% of your day look like? Is it kind of out and about, moving around? Is it planning? Is it emails? And if it is planning, what does that look? What's your actual what are you actually planning? Are you drawing? Is it architectural type drawings? Or?
I do a lot of the reviews of the drawing or seeing what things we need to have to host and really make our designed environment match what we need at Idaho State University campuses. And it's all three main campuses as well as some of the others. So I'll do some days where I am very heavy on email, very heavy on Zoom meetings because I'm often coordinating across different teams.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're working with everybody.
So yesterday I was on a Zoom and I had administration and faculty from Meridian. I had administration from Pocatello. I had a couple people from Idaho Falls. Sometimes I have faculty and administrators, architects and construction designers. Sometimes it's just planning consultants, the city. I've been working with the city of Pocatello planning on a couple of items. As well as, so I'll spend time on that. This is coordinating people. Where are we going? Everybody has to look at their agency plans. Is this in line? Get approvals in, get funding in. The other part of my day is I was walking with some people from our trades. So we walked through physical science building, Fraser Hall, Lilla Bridge, and another building. And we were looking at multiple things from signage to lighting and to air returns and to a plumbing issue and to a grounds issue that was inhibiting that. So it's a combination of a lot of desk time and a lot of the joy is getting outside and walking the campus and buildings on campus. So it's both
Right.
in that, and the diversity of needs, and it goes week to week. I could be doing something from helping GIS Trek on their campus mapping
Oh, wow.
that we're doing and pulling out where are the AED locates, where are emergency exits, where are fire extinguishers, to how does the student navigate and on their mobile phone, how can they see once they get inside Meridian where they enter the doors, where's their classroom,
Right.
where's student services. So it's a lot of looking through a lot of policies, a lot of guidelines and operational items, looking at architectural plans, and then a lot of physical space walking.
So do you like that balance? Do you need that balance, do you think, in a job?
I definitely do.
Yeah.
I need to have multiple balls in the air, otherwise I get bored.
Right.
I'm really a big picture planner, seeing the big picture.
Yeah.
When we get down to counting beans, then my attention span wanes and I look at something else I need to do. And that leads into kind of how I arrived. When I was growing up, my first job, I was geared to be a curator, a fine arts curator, was going there, but focusing on that one subject or these subjects for 3 months at a time. I saw a lot of squirrels and a lot of trees that I needed to go to, and I fell into, had opportunities to get more into art museum campus operations and building and design and renovations of historic buildings, and that's really where my path started, taking the left turn and knowing I needed to have multiple inputs.
Right. Right.
And not just one focus area.
Yeah. And the same with working with people. It sounds like your job takes a lot of kind of coordination and communication and teamwork skills. Is
Correct.
that correct?
Excellent. And a lot of professional levels.
Right.
So I'll work with
sure.
everyone from the students, and I love to give a voice to the students and remind the university when we're designing a building or the alumni center or a new residential hall. Or classroom settings. We're doing a lot of work on updating our classrooms. Mm-hmm. We have our voices of what we think, but I like to be the reminder. We need to bring in a group of students because that's our core mission. Mm-hmm. And we may think we know what the students are, but a lot of us are 20, 50, 10 years out from being a student. So we need to hear their voices, and that's my reminder, is to bring in all the stakeholders to have that voice at the table, or for me to go talk to them and to represent them at the table. And that's a very important thing, to have that diversity of professional levels, students, campus users, campus community involved, and have their input and be invested in, but also be heard in the small to large decisions.
Is that one of the things that you get a lot of satisfaction out of?
I do. I think we need to be broad with all of the different people that make a campus move and enliven our campus. That working with the diversity and equity and inclusion departments and kind of a lot of those and what we hear for that, but really living that. I'm the implementation part of those policies that are there. Yeah. What are we bringing into all of our office spaces, learning spaces, other spaces to welcome, broaden, and serve people from different cultural backgrounds and different experiential backgrounds, and to give that voice and make sure it's being heard and presented in that little reminder. Did we check in with this group?
Yeah.
Do we have this input here? Have we designed for the whole spectrum of introverts to extroverts? Where are the ambiverts?
Right. Yeah.
Where are they on that line?
Yeah.
We're in a mountainous region, which really, really attracts introverted people and the more introverted learning leaning extroverts. And campuses in our, it's engineers. It's a lot of the technical trades. They feel more comfortable in mountain environments, campuses, just like Golden, Colorado, the School of Mines. Sure. The same thing. They've done a lot of design and that mind and that mentality and how they interact with campuses and spaces, which is different than, say, California schools, which are open and in the ocean and get a lot of the extroverts. So bringing that in design and reminding people, who are we attracting, who are we serving, or, hey, we need to attract more extroverts. How do we make our space and our campus more attractive to those type of students to balance out who we have here?
This kind of stuff is completely fascinating to me. The idea of it's kind of like the unseen world, but it's really the world that we see every single day, and just it's such a part of our life, but we don't really recognize how much a part of our life it is, and how intentional the design behind it is. And I mean, you've kind of given us a couple little tidbits of what that might look like, but can you just give me like a couple examples of how things like signage or like spaces like might have played into a design element that you've worked on here in the past, and why that you went that direction? Or?
It is, and I'll start with a little background. So you know how you feel when you walk into your bedroom or your house, and how you just have that automatic feeling of comfort and this is your space where you belong.
Hopefully.
And then you've experienced places where you've walked in, if you've ever had to walk into a courtroom or into another place that just was not your thing. You're a little on edge.
Right.
The hairs on your neck are there. You're a little tense. So I feel it's our job to make people, to take those barriers and that feeling and that intimidation out of our space experience. So if we come in to wayfinding, and that's something we are working on with a lot of units, marketing, communications, facilities, a lot of our student affairs, our academic affairs departments, our partners. When you arrive on campus, you get to this parking lot, you get to this entry. How do we get to you to where you go? How you read, where you see things, how you can map and navigate on campus is really important. So we've done the interactive map that I mentioned before, GIS Trek. We had it last year, soft opening, 2 weeks before campus, 4,000 visits, 4,000 hits on that map where you can, on your phone, this is where I am, this is where you are. You find out, okay, I need to find the Pond Student Union, or I need to find Rendezvous, Room ABC. You have it there, you see where you go, and you can see where you go. So we're getting the younger generation. We have the print maps, the online maps for the older generation to see, okay, this is where I go. So that was a big collaborative effort with public safety, student affairs, facilities, GIS folks to get those going. And for signage, it's the same thing. How do we navigate? First, where are we? Where do we need to go? Once we're in a building, where do we need to go from in that building? So we're doing a lot of those tiered signage projects are actually starting to kick off now, and we'll be going through the summer for direct building directory signs. Where are they located? I can't tell you how many buildings I've walked in and directory signs are behind a door, or behind another large, like or another large, display or LCD screen has been put up in front of the building directory, so people walk in and don't know where to go. So how they experience that. Another challenge I bring, I grew up with friends who, in that community, some of them had parents that were incarcerated. When they did their visits in the prison system, their parents were clothed in orange because those were the visitations. So I always bring to mind, we have great branding, we have that orange is there, but what are some other implications that can have that remind people of those experiences that not many of us have experienced, but that informs a lot of those groups we're trying to bring into the higher education department. So how do we soften that, and how do we balance orange with different connotations? It's exciting, it's spangled orange, but there's another large population that students we're trying to attract. It has a completely different connotation. So how do we balance and soften that so when they come in, they feel welcome, and if they may have that first lean back, a little on edge, how do we make them feel comfortable and invite them in and have other elements that draw them in? The sub room. It's a great room in the union where people come and eat, we gather, we do things. How do we draw them in for those events and make them feel comfortable and at ease once they get past some barriers, or just to feel comfortable, and this is their space and they are part of our community. So there's soft design elements that we're always balancing and looking at for context and experience.
Wow. I like that. This is the kind of, I'm just so fascinated by these kind of things, right? Like, when I walk into I don't know, like now when I walk through the sub, I'm going to be looking at like the color palettes on the wall. Like, I decided they went with a nice soft gray in here. Like a low lit roar sign. Maybe that's just kind of warms up the space or opens it up, or any of these ideas. But, so, it sounds like there's actually like a lot of different elements of your job. Like psychology seems to be a huge part of your job, almost like a kind of sociological perspective, as well as more of like these fine arts kind of aesthetics ideas mixed with engineering and architecture, which is kind of more stringent. And at the same time, you have to communicate and collaborate with a wide range of people, which we're going back earlier to the kind of personality that might attract someone to, say, an engineering degree was an example you brought up. But someone who might be working in things like engineering or even fine arts might also not be the same type of person who is completely comfortable always kind of in a group of people having to communicate and collaborate on a daily basis. So I guess what I'm getting at, and I'm wondering is, what was your way in? Were any of those like an initial kind of entry point for you, one of those interests? And I guess, a question that I ask everyone, we could start here and maybe get to that. But when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I grew up in the time where Sesame Street was established, and the Muppets were my friends.
Yes.
And first place of learning. So I always, when I got older, wanted to be a puppeteer.
Okay, yeah.
Or an astronaut, but I also wasn't excelling at engineering or math, so I was leaning towards that. So those were the two. As a child, that's really what my core heart was. This fun, laughter, learning has been that. And as I went up, I originally had fine arts and sciences and languages were my initial areas of study. Mm-hmm. When I got to the real work world, like I said, I discovered, I thought I wanted to be this. It's not really making me happy. Mm-hmm. I'm other things, and I realized I started enjoying people and my interaction with the people. And when people came into that major city I worked in that art museum, how did they experience it, and how did our visitors who may not have the language or cultural context, how did we direct and manage them and enhance their experience and make them feel comfortable and enjoy what they came to see? So then from my 20s, I kind of shifted from this academic point of view to this operational physical space, just general operations, and then layering that psychology of how you experience a physical space, whether it's inside and outside, whether you have views outside to the natural world, even when you're inside working or you're inside visiting a museum or some other place of learning. And the importance of that, even having visual paths to the outside. The research has shown that enhances classrooms having windows and light, natural light. Right. Is a much higher performance in learning and instructional experience than closed wall, no vision views to the outside or even to the hallways or atriums. Right. Their learning and instructional experience and comfort goes down. Yeah. So just learning that over the years and going from art campuses to hospital campuses to university campuses, just different paths and growing in different areas. So.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Amy Salmore, University Planner at Idaho State University. So you'd said then it sounds like your first the first step was in art and kind of like that creative world. Was that what you majored in undergrad, or?
I did. So I'm just wondering sorry to cut you off, and I'm sure you'll get to this, but thinking about like what do you have to do to move from an art degree to where you are now, and what did you have to kind of build? So I did, my undergrad was in fine arts as well, with a minor in geology and languages. Oh, okay. And then I went back for a master's in my late 20s, and that was really more focusing on getting into that planning and administration, public administration type of role, architecture role. So I did go back and completed that degree to get that education. But at the same time, most of my professional work career was evolving to operations, campus planning, campus real estate, campus growth and design, working in planners. So there's a lot of on-hands learning. And the benefit I had is I'm very naturally curious. How do things work? Yeah. How do things get done? So I think in one of my introductory roles into campus planning, I got to know, at that university, I spent a lot of time in the lock shop. I spent a lot of time with our HVAC guys, people that fix your air conditioning and your heat. How do you read your plans? What are your plans? How do you do things? How do you solve this problem that the architects have solved for you but actually does not work in reality, or it breaks after this? How do you do that? And how do you let the architects know this doesn't work? Because we've had to repair it every 2 weeks here in design. And how does that communication happen or not happen? So I would go back and spend a lot of time in the shops with the people I saw working. I would also see, how do you experience campus, and what are you repairing, and how their relationships were with the person who fixed your heat or your radiator, or the person that fixes your flickering lights with that person in that office, or those people in that dormitory.
Right.
So I built a lot of on-the-ground knowledge, backed it up with my master's degree, and then just have rotated through different areas, just increasing knowledge in different roles, like real estate and space, our space renovations, our space campus planning, which is a lot of policy, a lot of committee work. What are the major strategic initiatives and academic initiatives of the campus? What are those procedures? Then I was in the implementation. Okay, we had the administration have come up with these. How do we implement those, course correct, and make sure that we're always serving our core mission of our students and their instructional learning experience? So it was, and mine was unusual. A lot of people in planning tend to be architects, engineers, public administration are kind of the backgrounds and the degrees that lead people into that. And there's mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, civil engineering, all sorts, structural engineering feed into that, as well as the pure architecture, drafting. Space management is a very niche area where it's always a Tetris game. So if anyone's really good at Tetris or some of those other games where you're blocking and going to get movement, you'll be a really good space manager of, all right, this unit, we have requests for 4 new offices and open office area. They need to be co-located by these 2 departments. They can't be up at Alvin Ricken at Eames. They have to be within the quad. Where do you have this space on the quad? And so what's your Tetris moves? Okay, we're going to move these 2 departments who also need to increase or decrease their space to move that department in, but we have to time it with classroom schedules, fall, summer, winter, when funding comes in, least amount of disruption. So this 4 offices becomes a 2-year project because we have to shift 2 other departments who also need to be right sized for their space to this other department. So if you're really good at games and puzzles, it's also another way, or are the 2 other things I like to do. You get some niche areas on a campus environment.
I mean, just made me realize that, maybe I was studying to do this during a lot of my college courses because I would often pass the time by playing Tetris on my phone during.
Exactly, right?
Not to out myself too much, but I got really good. I studied a lot of Tetris during some of those very large gen ed classes, let's say. So I love what you said about curiosity. Like, I have the same kind of inclination. It's part of why I do this podcast. It's part of actually how I initially met you when we were our office was moving offices and we needed to create more space to incorporate more people into this existing office space, and it's just things like design, spacing, architecture just fascinate me. So I just, with no background besides playing too much Tetris in college, I kind of just inserted myself into the process for our department. But it's something that I think that I really want our students to understand, is that it's a benefit to kind of to be open to your curiosity and to follow it down different pathways and see what is this? What is going on down here? I want to learn more about it. And you don't have to become a master in anything, but you almost talked about how like the university space is almost kind of like a living organism.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's all these different pieces going on all over the place, from the HVAC to the electrical to the engineering to the landscaping, and thinking about not only what is each person's need, but like how do these all kind of move together in one piece. And you have to have at least a little bit of curiosity to invest into each one of those kind of places to be able to see that big picture and get the whole organism to thrive. Along this way, I mean, you bring up things like, you start in the art world, and you said that you have to like review policy. So I'm wondering what for you in this job that has so many different facets has been maybe like from a technical perspective, one of the most challenging things to learn. And I bring this up because as you were saying that, you said you had to review a lot of policy, and like I felt like a pain in my stomach. Like that's one of my least favorite parts of a job is here's all the paperwork and the technical legalese that we also need to is our due diligence, and sometimes it's necessary evil for another part of the job that I like. This is just me speaking for me, but it's often not a place I thrive. I often feel kind of bad that I'm letting down my job, that I know I'm not going to put as much into some of these pieces. I'm still going to give it what I can give it, but it's a challenge. So yeah, what pieces out of all this for you have been kind of the more challenging to learn on like a professional scale?
I think there is a technical aspect of learning some of the design. Technical aspect of learning some of the design elements on these are all the things in the mechanical drawings, and these are the symbology in the mechanical drawings for exhaust air, other air, where we're coming with our external air. But I think policy, like you said, you have to be of a certain personality and have a certain pain threshold to really enjoy writing policy. So I really appreciate everybody in General Counsel office that helps out and has guided me through that. You have these capital P policies that really set up your base framework for if there's a problem, or how do we plan? How do we figure out what's most important? What's our decision tree? So you have your capital P policy. And that's a fine art in being vague enough, but specific enough. So if you have a problem or you have a disagreement, how do you elevate it? Who resolves that? Do we have enough? And then the next level down are procedures. How do we handle space requests? How do we manage who goes where, what goes where? How do we get the funding in? That's really a procedural area to be transparent so that everybody in every unit says, I need more offices. How do I do that? Or, oh my gosh, our space is we're in the basement. We're in the sub-level basement. We have no natural light. Everything's white. There's always a constant buzzing. It just feels institutional.
Yeah.
How can we get that improved? But how do we make sure that people, whether it's a student or entry-level staff, that procedure should be there so they can find it very easily and readily. And so I think it's really marrying policy and procedures. And at a school, in a university environment, those are really hard to get approved.
Yeah.
So you have to know what's the approval process, what elements are going to make everybody happy, what elements do you need to represent for those voices to come in. And I think for me, it's learning the different political and ego types that are behind there. How do you communicate to these different levels? Yeah. Why are you university planner? Why do you care about these? Why is it important to be able to speak to that from, all different sorts of professional and student levels and bring that in? And each university, each campus environment, because there's different campuses, like I said, there are hospital, arts campuses, so many different campuses, R&D campuses. How do you speak to those personalities and those types to get that through and learn that cultural background and cultural importance to that physical area, whether it's in Pocatello, Idaho, whether it's in Eugene, Oregon, whether it's in Savannah, Georgia. You have different inputs, and then your archetypes that you got to work through. Right. So that's a big challenge, but it's also a big challenge, which is kind of very fun, and you get to meet more people with every step of the way. Yeah,
so. Just that perspective too. I think it's like take that perspective. I like meeting people. I like talking to people. Maybe that's kind of the you're in with your curiosity and the fact that you like to be around people.
And that's how you build relationships and you build trust and investment. So that's a hard thing. So we do a lot of space management and space change. People may have been in these spaces, a department may be in the space for 30, 60 years, and we're going to now move you.
Right.
But if I work and understand what they need, what their problems are, what their pros are, kind of get a sense of how you live in this space, because we spend so much time in our workspace or our learning space, 8-10 hours more a day. So it really is a home, and you have ownership of that. How can we build that trust? Okay, let me understand you so you can trust me. So when we do have to move you, you do experience change, which is disruptive. Right. How can we make it that least disruptive and give you some carrots to help you transition and move? But it's building that relationship and understanding how whole different levels of disciplines and personalities and characters, how they experience, how they communicate. So it is a fun puzzle. Yeah. Whether it's policy or space or, the constant leak that comes out of your roof.
Yeah,
so.
as we kind of wrap up here, do you have any insights or advice for career seekers, be they, students just starting out or folks maybe mid-career thinking about a change? What would you tell them?
I would say don't be afraid to course correct, and don't be afraid to try things, and don't be afraid to fail. If you try something and you find out it's just not a good match, you may have to stay there for a while till you get training or education or find another job that looks more attractive. But don't be afraid of that. And I think our world and our current environment, and especially the pandemic time, we're really learning how to find your personal values, how those translate into your career values, find a good fit, a good purpose. If you have a purpose or you find something that is just very striking to your inner core and gives you, hey, I'm excited to work up and go do this today. And that changes as you get older. So I think I've moved and evolved, every 3 to 4 years. And I've had a couple of those every 5 years, 10 years, a major shift in where I'm working and what I'm doing. And don't be afraid of taking the risk, but also don't be afraid of failing, because you learn and you may really define, I really thought this is where I wanted to be. I really wanted to be this electrical engineer. But boy, I'm really missing something in my life. So I'm going to try and shift into this. How can I translate my skill set I've had, learn up a couple more skill sets, and maybe do something where it's more rewarding? And don't be afraid of that. And you'll find your space. And if you find someone that thinks, hey, what do you do? What's really interesting? Ask them. Yeah. People love to mentor. People love to talk about how they get there in their paths. And there's also other people that know exactly what they want from age 5.
Yeah.
And they get there. And we're all good, and all our pathways to where we end up is good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming by today, Amy. I'm going to go walk around campus and look at some things I don't usually look at.
All right. Thank you for your time.
And that was my conversation with Amy Salmore. I find it so interesting to think about the world around us that we never consider on the day-to-day basis, and think about how, someone must have been behind that. And I love what she said about curiosity. I think that coupling those two ideas is a really great way for people out there who are thinking about maybe a career shift or deciding on a career. Look around you. Look around everywhere. Be curious and ask questions. You never know what you're going to find out there. If you are interested in learning more about your career pathway, please visit the ISU Career Center website at isu.edu/career. Also, you can listen to many different career conversations on our past Pathways episodes, which can be found at Spotify, YouTube, kisu.org/pathways, and monthly, the second Wednesday at 7:30 on KISU FM. From Pathways and the Idaho State Career Center, this is Mark Beaver, wishing you a fantastic rest of your day.